And any night when Hannah would tell her father that she was not ready or she was still sore and wounded, Tony would bring out a letter he had forged and handwritten himself, showing it to Hannah to blackmail her. "You almost gave away our secret," Tony hissed. "Do you want your mother's ghost to punish you for disappointing me?" he said in rage. Hannah was just 2 years old when her world began to unravel in ways way too dark for a 2-year-old to comprehend. Sitting on her small bed, she clutched the photograph of her late mother, tears streaming down her face. It was almost 8 p.m. Dread filled her tiny body as she realized it was time for her father, Tony, to return home, and his coming only meant that her nightmare would begin all over again. "Mummy," Hannah whispered through sobs, "are you proud of me now? Am I doing what you wanted me to do for Daddy? It hurts so much, Mummy. I wish you were here. I wish you can come back so you can make him stop." The memory of the first night it happened haunted her, sharp and vivid. She had felt a pain, unlike anything she'd ever known, when Tony stumbled into her room that fateful evening. It was a cold, rainy night, the kind where thunder growled ominously and raindrops beat heavily against the windows. Hannah and Tony had just returned from Lisa's burial ceremony that held earlier that day. Tony sat alone in his dimly lit living room, a bottle of beer in his hand and several empty bottles scattered around him. His bloodshot eyes were fixed on the framed photograph of Lisa, his late wife. "How could you, Lisa?" he whispered, slurring his words. "How could you leave me like this? What am I supposed to do without you?" Grief consumed him, and the alcohol only deepened his despair. He had decided that night to end it all. Life without Lisa was unbearable. He rose unsteadily, staggering toward the bathroom, the place where he planned to take his own life. But then, as he passed the partially open door of Hannah's room, he stopped. Hannah was asleep, her small body curled up in bed. Her face, still tear-streaked from crying herself to sleep, reminded Tony so vividly of Lisa that it blurred his senses. Drunk and disoriented, Tony stepped into the room, staring down at his daughter. His vision clouded by grief and alcohol, he saw not a child, but a shadow of his wife. And in that fleeting, horrifying moment, something inside him snapped. Without hesitation, Tony crossed a line that should never have been crossed. He pounced on his daughter and began to do the unthinkable. From that night onward, Tony returned to Hannah's room each evening after work. He brought her chocolates and toys, telling her they were gifts from her loving daddy. But then he would blindfold her and murmur in a soothing yet twisted tone in her ear, "This is what your mother would want you to do for me, Hannah. You're making her proud. Be strong, my good girl. Don't cry. Don't worry, I won't let you look into my eyes. It'll be over soon." Tony would come back home every night with gifts and flowers, as though his wife Lisa was still waiting for him. Hannah, only 2 years old, was too young to understand what was happening. She believed every word her father said, and despite the pain she experienced in the process, she convinced herself she was fulfilling her dead mother's wishes just as Tony claimed. "I'm only doing this because I love you, Hannah," he would always say to his daughter. Hannah, a naive little child who knew nothing about the world and her rights as a girl child, gave in each night to her father's demand. She believed his every word and bore the pain, thinking she was doing what her late mother would have wanted her to do for her daddy because that was exactly what her father told her. Tony so deceitfully brainwashed his naive and innocent child to take part in an act that was formidable for a 2-year-old child. And so this became a recurrent routine for Hannah and her father each and every night. By age 3, Hannah still was not enrolled in school. Tony kept dragging his feet about putting Hannah in school. He feared that he would be leading Hannah to exposure. Someone may find out about his little secret doings. Hannah might speak up to a friend or anybody at all. And that would be the end for him. Hannah was his consolation after Lisa's passing, and he was not going to let anything or anyone come in the way of his newly found happiness. Tony never let any of his male friends come close to Hannah. He would scream at anyone who tried even to say hi to her or innocently come close to his child. Tony protected Hannah like a hawk, locking her up most times in her room and calling her his wife when no one was around. Hannah cried each night but kept promising her mother that she would be strong and bear the pain, just to make her proud. And any night when Hannah would tell her father that she was not ready or she was still sore and wounded, Tony would bring out a letter he had forged and handwritten himself, showing it to Hannah to blackmail her, telling her it was a letter her mother had written to her just before she died, a last wish Lisa had made, instructing Hannah to please her father and do whatever he asked and to always be a good girl to Daddy. After seeing the letter raised to her face, Hannah would give in again and again and not question all that her father was doing to her. Daddy would never do anything to hurt me, Hannah would tell herself before going to bed. The blackmail continued for months, and so did the abuse. Tony called it love. He convinced himself he was loving his child in a special way, but in reality, Tony's relationship with his daughter had blurred the lines between love and protection. His actions were evil, and he knew it. He had done it just once on the day he was intoxicated and not in his right mind, but then he forgot that evil repeats itself, and now he couldn't find the means to stop it. As the years passed, Tony's behavior became increasingly controlling. He kept Hannah isolated, forbidding visitors and keeping her from attending school until she was 5 years old. When Tony finally enrolled Hannah into school, he was enormously pained to let Hannah leave his presence for the first time. Before leaving for school that morning, Tony instructed Hannah, giving her strict rules. "Don't talk to anyone, stay quiet. Be Daddy's little girl, Hannah," he said to her. When Hannah finally entered her classroom at age 5, she struggled to adapt. She was very withdrawn, her gaze often fixed on her desk. Her teacher, Miss Rose, a class teacher who had a God-given spirit and was very observant, quickly noticed the quiet child almost immediately. One afternoon after school, Miss Rose decided to approach the little girl who was sitting at the corridor, waiting for her father to come pick her up. "Hannah," she said, kneeling to meet her eyes, "is everything okay? You can talk to me if you need help." Hannah hesitated, biting her lip. "I'm fine, Miss Rose," she whispered, her father's warnings echoing in her mind. But before Miss Rose could press further, Tony stormed into the school corridor. His presence was menacing, his voice sharp and defensive. "What are you asking my daughter?" he barked, his eyes flashing with barely concealed anger. Miss Rose stood her ground, though her heart raced. "Sir, I was just checking on Hannah. She seems very quiet and withdrawn. I wanted to make sure she's okay." "Well, she is okay," Tony snapped, grabbing Hannah's hand roughly. "She's been through a lot after losing her mother. Let her mourn in peace and stay out of her personal life," Tony said, before grabbing his daughter away. Miss Rose watched them leave, unsettled by Tony's outburst. Something wasn't right, and she couldn't shake the feeling that Hannah needed help. That evening, Tony confronted Hannah with rage. "What did you tell her?" he demanded, his face dark with fury. "Nothing, Daddy," Hannah cried. "I didn't say anything." But Tony didn't believe her. That day, for the first time, he laid his hands on his child, giving Hannah hot slaps across the face. The slaps stung Hannah's cheek as she clutched her face in shock and fear. "You almost gave away our secret," Tony hissed. "Do you want your mother's ghost to punish you for disappointing me?" he said in rage. He accused Hannah of intentionally drawing attention to herself. He blamed her for trying to reveal their secret and threatened her that her mother's ghost would beat her up in the middle of the night because she had almost revealed their secret. Sobbing, Hannah tried to explain, but Tony locked her in her room. Later that night, he returned with a belt, his shadow looming over Hannah's small figure in the darkness. "I'm sorry, Mummy," Hannah cried as the belt came down. "I'll be a good girl. Please don't let Daddy hurt me anymore." But the whipping continued. Hannah never recovered from the incident that night, and now her world was cloaked in darkness, and she believed all her father had told her even more. Hannah's condition grew increasingly worse in school, and Miss Rose couldn't help but notice that something was terribly wrong, and something dark was going on within the little child. It was as though the Spirit of God within Miss Rose kept pushing her towards Hannah, and although she truly did not want to involve herself in Hannah's affairs anymore because of her father, something deep down kept telling her Hannah needed help. Maybe her father could not see that something was wrong with the child, Miss Rose thought to herself. One faithful night in her home, Miss Rose said a little prayer. "Dear Lord, you have set me as a teacher and guardian to the children you have put under me. Please help me not only to teach them, but also to shine my light to them in every area of their lives where they may be experiencing darkness. You have been using me mightily for these children. Please do not stop. Use me once again. Lord." Miss Rose prayed and said a special prayer for Hannah before going to bed. One fateful day in class, Miss Rose noticed Hannah slip out of the classroom in haste. She decided to follow her as she watched her go into the restroom. There, she found the child trembling and visibly in pain. Hannah was bleeding because her father had raped her forcefully the night before. "Hannah," Miss Rose said with wide-eyed wonder, her voice trembling as she crouched beside the girl. "You're bleeding. Are you hurt? What happened?" Hannah hesitated before saying softly, "I can't tell you. Daddy says I'll get in trouble." Miss Rose's heart broke, but she maintained her composure. "You're safe with me, Hannah. No one will hurt you, I promise. Please tell me what's wrong so I can help you." Hannah immediately broke down in tears. "It's Daddy," she said softly, her voice trembling. "Daddy did this to me." Miss Rose's eyes widened in horror. As Hannah began to tell her of her late mother's last wish and how it all started. By the time Hannah was done speaking, Miss Rose was shaking in her boot. Tears welled up in her eyes as she hugged Hannah tightly. "Thank you, Lord. Thank you for finally setting this daughter of yours free. Thank you, Hannah, for telling me." Miss Rose whispered as tears fell from her eyes. She remembered her own story of abuse in that instant, and how she suffered for years because of the fear of speaking up or talking to someone. She had taken it upon herself to help as many kids as she could in her adult years, and she was going to go any length to stop this madness and get justice for little Hannah. From that moment, Miss Rose carried Hannah's case on her head. She reached out to human rights organizations, sharing Hannah's story and all the allegations that was made. At first, the response was slow. "We need evidence," the human rights officers told her. Miss Rose knew she needed Hannah's voice to make a case. One day at school, during break time, Miss Rose asked Hannah if she wanted to go on a little adventure. Hannah agreed, and with gentle encouragement, she brought Hannah to meet the human rights officers. In a quiet, supportive environment of interrogation, Miss Rose encouraged Hannah to speak and not be afraid. The interrogation started. Hannah was very frightened to expose her father for the fear of what would happen to her at night. She did not want the ghost of her mother coming back to whip her again, but Miss Rose held her hand and gave her a gentle nod, signaling that she would be fine and that it was okay for her to speak. Finally, after a long struggle, Hannah began to open up. Her words were halting and uncertain, but they were enough to set an investigation into motion. That same day in the sunny afternoon, Tony sat on his couch at home. He had not gone to work that day. He was still home, sitting and watching the clock, waiting for school to be over so he could go pick up Hannah from school, when suddenly there was a knock on the door. Human rights officers, along with Miss Rose and Hannah, entered the house with firm expressions. "Tony Matthews, we need to talk," one of the officers said. Tony's face turned pale. "What's this about?" he asked, trying to mask his panic. When they explained the allegations, Tony's demeanor shifted to anger. "How dare you accuse me of touching my own child? This is absurd. It's not true. I am not a madman. This crazy teacher has succeeded in brainwashing my daughter and turning her against me. You can't believe her. It's a lie," Tony screamed. The human rights officer quickly responded, "We checked your daughter, sir, and we found evident wounds and bruises in her private area. I would advise you not to speak any further, because anything you say or do here would be used against you in the court of law. Tony Matthews, you are under arrest for incest and child molestation."
Tony's eyes widened in shock. Panic struck him, and in that moment he lost it and immediately went into a frenzy. "My wife gave her to me," he bursted out in anger. "She's my daughter, my property. No one can take her away from me." The officers moved to restrain him, and as they led him away, Tony's fury turned to Miss Rose, who stood quietly in the corner, holding Hannah firmly in her arms. You meddled in things that weren't your business," he shouted. "This isn't over. I will get out, and I will come for you. I promise you, you can't take my daughter away from me." Miss Rose met his glare with steady resolve. "Hannah deserved better," she said firmly. "You cannot scare me, and you can't hurt her anymore." Tony was led out of his house and arrested. With Tony gone, Hannah began a new chapter. Miss Rose, who had always dreamed of making a difference in her students' lives, took Hannah into her care temporarily. She provided a safe and nurturing environment where the little girl could begin to heal. Miss Rose used the opportunity to educate the other girl students in her school, admonishing and encouraging them during a school assembly to speak up if they were being abused in any form by anyone. "It doesn't matter who it is," she said to the crowd before her, "or for how long or short it has been going on. Speak up. If you can't tell your mum, tell your teacher, tell your auntie. But don't stay quiet, little girls. Remember, silence is consent. If you speak up, together we can combat sexual abuse and the continuous molestation of the girl child. Help me to help you, and join me in this quest to bring those responsible to justice." Miss Rose succeeded in spreading the awareness, and the schoolgirls became more vigilant. That night in her home, Miss Rose walked into Hannah's room to read her a bedtime story. But the child jumped up from her sleep in fright at the sound of footsteps in her room. Miss Rose could immediately sense her trauma and her fear, and her heart sank when she thought about all the fear and trauma that would have crushed Hannah's spirit over the years and clung to her heart by now. "It's okay to be scared," Miss Rose said to Hannah as she hugged her on the bed. "I'm not here to hurt you, and I will never let anyone ever hurt you again." "But you're so brave, Hannah," Miss Rose said. "And you are not alone anymore. Your mother would be proud of you," Miss Rose said gently, looking down at Hannah with a smile. Hannah nodded, her eyes filling with tears. For the first time, she felt a glimmer of hope. She felt like she did not need to go through pain anymore, or do anything special for her to be loved by the people around her. Life became fairer for Hannah, and the days ahead beamed with hope and a lingering promise of total freedom and restoration. This story highlights the importance of vigilant intervention and support for children in vulnerable situations. If you or someone you know is in a similar situation, please do not be afraid to speak up. Reaching out to anyone, to authorities or trusted organizations, is crucial. Together, we can create a world where every child is protected against the predators in the world and enable an environment where the girl child feels safe and loved. Please, spread the word. Thank you so much for watching. Please do not forget to turn on your notification bells to get notified whenever we upload a new story. Please leave a like, share, and leave your comments on this story. Your continued support means the world to me, and it is greatly appreciated. Until we meet again, stay blessed, and I'll see you in my next story.